I didn't miss my.
Hi.
All right.
How are you guys? It's very nice to talk to you. This is a fun, weird time. I'm really glad to be here with you, Ken.
Really gotta be too weird. Where are we exactly?
We are at CCTV, and we're doing Story Club Boston. So if everyone in this room knows everything I'm going to say. Yay!
Thank you. Rousing round of applause.
If for some reason you're a person in the future and you're not sitting in this room with me right now, Story Club Boston is a monthly storytelling show that we have at the Milky Way in Jamaica Plain. And then every once in a while, we pick the best people who've been on it, and we have them come here and tell their stories again to a weird room full of cameras with lamps.
It's like an interrogation without the reward.
Yeah, pretty much. It's fun. So we're very psyched. All the people who are on the show tonight are fantastic. I'm really psyched that this is one of my favorite things where I get to see all tellers that I've really liked and think are really fun and stuff. So it'll be cool.
Introduce it. This is Angela Sawyer. Who's
Hi.
a great host.
Hello.
She's a storyteller, stand-up comedian. She does music sometimes.
Music in quotes, please.
Yeah, exactly. Put your finger quotes up there. And she's the host of the show.
Nice. Ken over here, Ken Green, he's my co-host for this evening. Ken is amazing. Give it up for Ken. I love him to death.
That's the two Ken Greens around here. I don't know which one you're talking about.
Ken has been running Story Club Boston for, several years?
Yeah, say several. That sounds
several,
good.
yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, it's more than one. That's for
It's
sure.
how are we still doing this?
I don't know. The kindness of people's hearts to give us a space to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I met Ken several years ago when he was running over Improv Boston, and it's moved around to various places.
Yep.
And Ken is a fantastic storyteller.
You're a great host, which is why I got you. I said,
Look
hey,
him up, find out things about him, because he's very smart.
No, not really. But anyway, I'll try. Nah.
Cool.
That's it. So we got a bunch of storytellers lined up tonight, some great storytellers. Stories are different. There are different forms of storytelling. There are different ways to tell stories.
One of the things I like about Story Club Boston is that you don't have to be funnier than the other person who talks. You don't have to be have had worse things happen to you than the other people who are talking.
It helps, but
you don't have to one-up anybody. I think that everybody has stories. Anybody who's survived a college party has lots of stories inside them, and we like to hear them. So
exactly.
We like it when people are great and they come out and we sort of get to know them better through their stories, and that's about it.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
That's great.
So Ken's going to hang out with some lamps and tell you things. I love the lamps.
Just like another day at home. You do the same thing at home.
I'm so into the lamps on this set, I got to tell you.
That was very clever. You did a good job.
What's your story about?
It's about how I almost drowned because of marijuana. So,
that seems great. That seems great. Give it up for Ken.
And the thing about Story Club Boston is that we can let you, if you read out, a lot of people I'm mostly a writer. I work for newspapers, I write stories, I write plays that are performed every now and then. So I'm mostly writing else. And if you are a writer and wants to come to Story Club Boston, if you like most easier reading off paper, bring it down. We don't, as long as it's a good story, we don't care. That's why I read off paper most of the time, just to let people know it can be done. And like I said, it's a story about how I almost drowned because of marijuana. So. Okay, I grew up in Chicago, and if you've ever seen a map of the city, you'll notice that it's right by a major body of water called Lake Michigan. Now, Lake Michigan is nowhere near the size of an ocean, but it's still a pretty substantial body of water, capable of sustaining all kind of fish, including some you can actually eat, and that only contain trace amounts of mercury and human fecal matter in their systems. But even though that large body of water, one of the Great Lakes, by the way, was only a few minutes away from our homes, my 4 friends and I never once felt the need to grab a rod and reel and a container of worms, go over to Lake Michigan and try to snag a few bluegills or salmon or trout or, I don't know, sailfish. I'm not really sure what actual fish lived in that water. We don't do it because A, Brian, Charles, Dude, JT, and I weren't fucking Huckleberry Finn. And B, as guys in their late teens in Chicago, we had more important things to do, like one of us borrowing our parents' car and driving around aimlessly for hours, getting shot down by girls, or watching scrambled porn on the pay-per-view TV channel. We also didn't do it because fishing was something old people did to quietly pass the time while they waited for the sweet release of death. We were young and cool, and fishing wasn't. In fact, we only knew one person who even owned fishing equipment, and that was Brian's old man. One day after one of us borrowed the parents' car and we were tired of driving around aimlessly, the getting shot down by girls part was scheduled for later in the day. We found ourselves walking around a local mall, and as we always did when we were there, we ended up at the sporting goods store where we passed the time by fucking with shit until the security guard chased us out. We tried on baseball mitts and pounded the inside of the palm as if we were just about to snag a line drive. We threw around a football and almost hit a lady in the head. We checked out the women's bathing suits and tried to imagine the women wearing the suits, or more specifically, putting them on. Finally, we found ourselves in the outdoor section, standing next to tents, folding camp chairs, and yes, fishing rods. None of that shit registered with us, as we were even less attracted to hunting than we were to fishing. But one thing did catch our eye: a gray inflatable 3-man boat. The picture on the front of the box showed 3 white people appearing having the time of their lives, paddling down some lazy stream and laughing at, I guess, the water. The sun was shining brightly. There were tall, majestic pine trees in the background, and maybe just beyond the trees, there were probably girls, only you couldn't see them under the cover of the box. It looked kind of fun, actually. It was Brian who first suggested all 5 of us pitch in to buy the inflatable boat. The others were quickly in agreement on how cool it would be to be out on the water, so they pretty much ignored me when I pointed out that there were 5 of us, and this was a 3-man boat. I was standing there trying to figure out the logistics when JT added a benefit that clinched the deal for everyone. We could get inside and smoke a joint in it. Now, we were pretty much gotten high in any number of places, trying to enhance the experience. On the roof of the local public school, surrounded by trees in the local forest preserve, in the upper deck of Old Comiskey Park, when attendance at a White Sox game was even shittier than it is now, so no worries about getting caught. But on a boat in the middle of a lake, that was new territory. I still had concerns about the seating arrangements, but I had to admit the idea of getting high in the lake was intriguing. We all emptied our pockets and managed to scrape up the money for the boat, took it home, and made plans to christen it the next day and set sail, or I guess set paddle. But Brian said it seemed kind of pointless to just sit out there on the water if we weren't going to do anything other than getting high. We should probably do something else too, like fish. Since his old man was the only one who ever had gone fishing, it was apparently in his blood. I once again reminded them that the boat explicitly stated capacity and how many of us there were. There was no way we'd get 5 guys and fishing equipment into the boat. But JT came up with the idea of using an entire inner tube with a bucket in the middle to transport the fishing equipment behind us in the water. It was a cool idea, but it still meant kicking the capacity can down the road. The next day at 9 a.m., that's when people got up to fish, Brian said. And armed with a 3-man inflatable boat, an inner tube, a bucket, fishing rods and reels, beer and 3 or 4 joints, we headed out in the car to the lake. Not Lake Michigan. We could be counted on to do some stupid things, but we managed not to do something that stupid. Instead, we drove to a much smaller body of water about 15 minutes south of us. Smaller but still big enough to require some amount of paddling to reach the middle. We unloaded everything, began taking turns blowing up the boat. With the boat fully inflated, we pushed it into the water, tied the inner tube to the back, put the rods in the bucket, and then stood there looking at it, trying to figure out how 5 guys were going to get into a 3-man boat. We tested a few configurations until deciding that 3 of us would sit in the middle, and the other 2 sitting on the edge of either end. I was on the back end. We all climbed in, waited until the boat stopped shaking, and then paddled away from the shore. It should be noted that our lack of fishing experience was only matched by our lack of swimming experience, which became more apparent to me the further away from the shore we got. Our individual abilities ranged from being able to tread water at the local pool to having no skills at all. Not having one life vest between us didn't help matters. No one with me seemed worried about this, so to avoid being the buzzkill, I said nothing and I just assumed I was going to die. After reaching the middle of the water, we thought we should give actual fishing a try. The rods floated in the inner tube behind us, and JT pulled up the rope to bring them closer. But the motion caused the bucket holding the rods to rock back and forth, a momentum that built up until the entire bucket flipped over. We all looked into the water and watched helplessly as the rods sank slowly to the bottom and out of view. Unless a carp voluntarily jumped in the boat, fishing was over for the day. So now what? We looked around at us, surrounded by sun, trees, and murky water. It was time to get high. JT pulled a joint out of his pocket, lit it up, and began passing it around. It finally reached me. I took a deep pull and heard a pop. A few sparks fluttered from the end of the joint. I knew what that meant. A seed. Dedicated weed smokers know that cleaning to rid the weed of stems and seeds meant an easy, trouble-free smoking experience. But JT was a little lazy and often in a hurry to get high, so he wasn't that diligent. which meant seeds. Seeds just like the one that popped out and was now burning a hole in the edge of the inflatable boat. Like an experienced man of the sea, I immediately panicked and yelled, "The boat has a hole in it, we're all gonna die." I pointed to the small hole next to me and clamped my thumb over it, hoping to save us all from dropping to the bottom of Harborside Marsh Pond. Smoking the joint meant reaction times were a little slow, and it took a few seconds before the gravity of the situation kicked in. After that, it was all frantic paddling and yelling, and me yelling directions. I decided I'd take the role of captain. There were only 2 paddles, so the other 3 of us slapped at the water like seals to get the boat moving faster to the shore. From a distance, it might have looked like we were having a great time, just a bunch of guys yelling and splashing around. On the boat, we were 5 idiots quite possibly going in a circle. After what probably was a few minutes, but seemed like several days, we managed to paddle and hand slap our way back to the shore. We dragged our marijuana-doomed boat in and watched it slowly finish deflating into a sad gray mess. There was brief talk of patching it up to take it out again, but the idea of fishing had lost its appeal. Besides, we really wouldn't have known what to do with a fish if we had caught one. Then there was a whole issue of the rods being at the bottom of the Harborside Marsh Pond, which was something Brian was going to have to discuss with his old man. Well, what now, somebody asked. The sun bounced off the water. A few boats slowly motored across in the distance. Somewhere, a fish was laughing at us. It was noon, which seemed like a pretty good time to smoke a joint, which we did.
Oh my God, Ken, you're the best. I love the idea of the fish being in the bottom of the lake, being like, "Oh no, these people are coming to eat us. Oh, they just gave up all their weapons." They just left them here for us. It's nice. Fantastic job. Fantastic job. I love that story. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. I have never been high on the water, so I have nothing to tell you about my life that relates to that story. I grew up in Colorado where there is no water. They have no water in there. I will tell you this. When I first moved to Boston, I felt insecure about the fact that Boston was a very big city, and I was basically from the suburbs in Colorado, which is all there is there. And I was like trying to figure out how to tell people that I was cool, but tell them where I was from. And so when I was in my 20s, I used to lie and tell people that my state only had 50 cars in it. And most of us rode a horse to school. And no one ever thought I was lying, I don't think. I think everyone was like, wow. So, yeah, tell people that about yourself. It's fun. Okay, our next performer I'm very excited to have on the show. I've seen him doing comedy around town, and he's super funny, really lovely. I think you guys are going to love him if you don't already know him. And he's also from Chicago, which is great. Ken is a huge fan of that place, which I have been to once. He's going to get, maybe for Thanksgiving, you can take me to Chicago. How's that sound? I'll learn. Cool. Anyway, I'm super psyched to bring this guy to the stage. Please put your hands together right now for Larry Fulford.
Oh, it was 2009, the year of our Lord. I was a 29-year-old boy living in the Sunshine State of Florida, and I was playing in a number of rock and roll bands. I'm not going to name drop. You don't know who they are. It's fine. They were just my friends' bands, really. I'd been playing drums since I was 14 years old, and I was like, had talented friends growing up, and I was like, oh, what better way to waste my 20s than play for drink tickets with friends that I know. But in 2009, something magical happened. One of those bands put out a record and got the opportunity to hit the road for 2 weeks. That's a big, big deal when you grew up in Florida throwing your life away in bands that nobody cared about. I was like, dude, 2 weeks, that's all my PTO. Like, that's amazing. Like, I'd gone on little weekend excursions, but 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weeks on the road, living in filth, that's like an amazing thing. So it was going to be 2 weeks around most of the East Coast and then the Southeast. And then, and most of it was like rock clubs and dive bars. It was like standard venues. Except the 5th night was in Gretna, Virginia. You can Google it if you want, like right now, that's fine. Gretna, Virginia, not Richmond, the only city worth knowing in Virginia. Gretna, Virginia, at a festival that was being promoted as Virginia's Burning Man. That's, Google Burning Man too while you're at it. Anyhow, we were not stoked. We were like, this is gonna be awful. This is gonna be hippies. This is gonna be awful. But we found out, like, our friends from Ohio, their band was on it. Our buddy from Knoxville, singer-songwriter, he was on it. We're like, you know what? Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. For Loku or whatever had just come out. So we're like, let's just grab 2 of those, pitch a tent in the woods, and hang out, you know? We were trying to make the best of it, is what I'm saying. And I'm just going to describe pulling in. So we got to Gretna, Virginia, having none of us had ever been. Who had been? Nobody knows where it is. We pulled into this field in the middle of nowhere. We had to go down this long dirt road, got to a field. It's mostly surrounded by trees. We were met by, I guess, the promoter on a 4-wheeler. In my memory, which is bad, he wasn't wearing a shirt. But, like, also maybe my memory is just like, dude, it was Virginia. He wasn't wearing a shirt. Maybe he was wearing a shirt. I don't know, to be fair. He told us where our campsite was. We went. It was like a shared little fire pit. It was cool. Like, people were already posted up that we didn't know, real cool people. We put our tent up. We put some chairs up. We were like, you know what? This is going to be fine. This is going to be fine. Then the sun set. And people were there, by the way. Like, this, like, I'm painting it horribly, but, like, people cared about Virginia's Burning Man for some reason. It wasn't Bonnaroo. There was, like, a couple hundred, I don't know, scattered throughout this forest. The sun set, and we took the stage, and there were some people hanging out, like, yeah, what are these guys about? Then we started playing, and people started jogging out of the woods towards us. Which at first was startling, because like I've seen zombie movies. I'm like, this is not great. It's good that we're semi-elevated, you know. But then they were just trying to get closer. Like, they came out, they heard music, they were like, yeah, another band. Like, and I was like, what? This is more shocking than zombies. People care about us, you know. Like, what is this new life? And we crushed it. We had a killer set. People were mouthing the words. Some dudes in my band. I was playing drums, so I couldn't see. But some dudes in my band were like, a couple ladies flashed us. But, like, also it was Virginia, so maybe they were just imagining no shirts, you know? I don't know. I was like, cool. So we finished on a high. Like, it was amazing. And I kind of retreated to our little tent site by myself. I cracked open, like, a High Life or something, and I was just sitting there by myself, just feeling on top of the world. I was like, man, 29 years old, one of my stupid bands is finally making it. We're on the road. We're playing weird festivals. Phantom girls are showing their boobs. It's not going to get any better than this. And then I looked down, there was this tiny little hippie drum, which, again, I would normally make fun of, but I was like, when in Gretna, bro. And I picked it up, and I was like tapping on it, like kind of making fun of it, but also kind of like, whatever, let's just do this. And our bass player, Bob, sat next to me, and he was just like, what are you doing? Too far. Put the drum down. I was like, no, dude. Gretna, bro. Like, I was like, really? I had gone from like, why are we here, to like, hell yeah, dude. But he was right. So I put it down. We were talking for a bit, and then I got up to get another beer, and this dude had sat down, our little camp neighbor, and he was like stoking the fire. And I tried to walk between the drum and the dude. I hit the drum, and it fell. And then I like barreled over it into the fire. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Like, face first into, it wasn't a huge fire, like, it was like half a lamp. It was like it was like that. But face first, and you're all looking at me like, come on, Larry, face first, you're very handsome. First of all, thank you, and you're right. Second of all, I was going face first, but I wasn't hammered, so I extended my arms, so my arms just went, mostly hand, just right into this fire. And I was like, wow, I gotta wake up. This is and I was like half in shock, half a little buzzed, but I like pushed myself out, and I looked at my hand, and I was like, oh, gross. But I was like, more than, like, there was no pain. Like, I was in shock, and like, there's no pain. That hadn't sunk in. I was just embarrassed, you know? Like, I was like, I hadn't fallen since I was like 4. And now I'm falling into a fire? That's stupid. So I was just like pacing. I tried to walk off into the woods to like scream at the Lord. Like, I was just really upset. And Bob was like, Larry, I need to see that hand. And I was like, no, like, don't look at me. And he's like, I need to see that hand. And he's like, he's like motherly and stuff. And I was finally just like, and I just held my hand up to his face, like real close. Bob would later describe what he saw on my hand as it looked like bacon grease sliding off a pan. But that was my hand, just leaving my hand. And he's like, dude, we got to get you fixed up. So we were a band in our 20s in the middle of nowhere. So we didn't have a first aid kit. Not at all. Not at all. But one dude had Preparation H and another dude had legit Tennessee moonshine. So we just poured both of those things on my hand. Bob was like smushing it around, like, which is how superheroes are born. Now that I'm thinking about that, like, this is how. And we're in the middle again, nowhere. Like we hadn't seen a Walmart in like 2 states. Like I don't even know where we are. But we have to get to a hospital. Bob's like, this is awful looking. We have to get to a hospital. So our little buddy from Knoxville had a car. So instead of our giant heavy van, we took his car. He was with us. We headed to the hospital. Shirtless promoter 4-wheeler guy told us it was about half an hour away. So I'm riding in this car, and then the pain hits. I'm like, whoa. I roll the window down. I do the whole hand in the breeze thing. No. That was like, don't do that. That didn't help. That was worse. And we pull up to this hospital, and we get out, and we go inside the entrance, and there's no one behind the desk at all, which whatever. It was probably like midnight. So we start walking the halls, like looking for someone. No one. There's just no one. I was like, of course, it's a Virginia hospital. It's just ghosts that live here. Like, no one. So I start like gently kicking these closed doors in this hospital. My singer's like, dude, don't do that. You get us in trouble. I'm like, we need to get in trouble. I got to fix this. Like, no one is here. Finally, we stumble upon the ER desk, which we'd somehow missed. And I got admitted. And the nurses were great, by the way. I need props to these nurses. They let me joke around. They threw me on a morphine drip, hand and saline solution. And they were like talking to me, like letting me goof. And they were like, what happened? And I said, would you believe that I tried to rescue a baby unicorn from a fire? And they were like, no. And I was like, Burning Man. No, I was at Burning Man. But then they were so cool. They went out, and it was okay for my friends to come in and see me. And they came in. But the nurses went out, and they go, hey, are you guys here with the guy that tried to rescue the baby unicorn? So they were super cool. I'll try to cut this a tiny bit short, but they were like, your hand is, like the whole palm of my hand was just gone. And they were like, we need to put you in a burn center. The nearest one is an hour away in Chapel Hill. You can take an ambulance or a helicopter. I was like, can I just take a gross tour van? I don't have helicopter or ambulance money, dude. They're like, no, we got to keep you got to be on a morphine drip or you'll lose your mind because of the pain. We got to keep your hand protected. And I was like, ambulance, I guess. Like, that's like $4 million cheaper probably. So rode in this ambulance, finally got a little bit of sleep. I was in the burn center, UNC Chapel Hill, for 3 days. By now, 4 of my fingers and my thumb, no, 3 fingers and a thumb, had swollen up to the size of like quality hot dogs. Like each one was like, which had to be popped to release whatever new liquid was in my fingers, which you will think of now every time you eat a hot dog for the rest of your life. Chicago, am I right, bro? So I finally saw a doctor. Doctor came in and he was like, hey, man, I want to just rattle off some questions. First of all, this happened to my right hand. He's like, are you left or right-handed? I was like, right-handed. And he winced. Like he like visibly was like, and he goes, what do you do for a living? I was like, data entry. And he's like, and he's like, what were you doing in Virginia? I was like, playing the drums. He's like, Jesus. This is like a hat trick of bad for you. So I had the option of getting a pig skin graft. Like they could have taken, I guess, a poor baby pig's side and stuck it. I don't know how that works. But I passed on that because they were going to have to put me under, and that freaked me out. So in favor, Bob and I flew back to Florida, and I started a bunch of physical therapy, like 3 months of physical therapy. Put a pin in that real quick. The other half of the band had to finish the tour without us, which included a homecoming show opening for Reverend Horton Heat. I don't know if you know who that is. Yeah. Giant show. Another band I played with landed an opening gig for Richard Buckner, who's like my favorite songwriter, one of them. Which I watched that show, by the way, just from the sidelines, wearing a gauze glove that was like a Mickey Mouse hand. And I got to go to physical therapy for 3 months. But it could have been way worse, guys. Like, it could have been way worse. I could have never played drums again. I eventually started playing drums again. I could have not been right-handed ever again. It could have been the end of drums, end of right-handed. But it was just the end of a tour. That's my time. Thanks, guys.
Oh, Larry, that was fantastic. I think my favorite thing was like the superhero whose origin is he gets his hand burned and then has Preparation H and alcohol in it. That superhero just goes around like cupping dudes' balls to help them forever after. You know, like he's just like, I feel the flame. That's all he does. It seems nice. That's a good superhero. Okay. I am going to bring up your next performer, who is fantastic. He hosted the show recently when I was somewhere else, and probably did a better job than I ever have. He's super, super funny. He often does a show that happens in Quincy on Fridays called Pick a Side Stupid, at which he is very, very good, which people probably don't know, so I will tell the world for later. It's a comedy debate show, and that is so hard to explain. I don't know how to explain it to anyone. Basically, it just means that he's very sharp, because it's a very hard show to do otherwise. And he's great. Please give it up right now for Nick Martucci.
All right, I'm going to start the story by spoiling the end a little bit, just so you're a little more comfortable listening to it. I haven't killed myself. Just keep that in mind as I tell the story. And there's a lot of reasons why I haven't killed myself yet. If I told you that 2 of those reasons are Twitter and a pop star from the mid to late 90s, again, believe me, that's 2 of the reasons why I'm still here. So anyway, back in August 2015, this was before I started comedy or anything. I had been living with my girlfriend for about a year at that point, going through work, going through life. One thing I had was a Twitter account with a modest following, a few hundred people, and just the world around you in 2015, you could start to see it sort of falling apart, start to see like the seams kind of tearing. So my way of dealing with that was to post jokes on Twitter about things that were making me angry. So one in particular, I tweeted out at like 3 a.m. one night, just had to do with gun control. It was abortion, ban it, gay marriage, ban it, birth control, ban it, guns. Well, you can't just ban things, people are going to find them anyway. I thought it was clever. It was one of, a lot of, I tweeted too much, but it was one of a lot of tweets. And I just threw it off, went to bed, went to work the next day. And at around, 3:30, I feel my phone buzzing. And I look down and I'm seeing a lot of Twitter notifications coming up. And I'm like, wow, like 20 people have liked that. That's a lot. 50 people have liked that. That's 100 people have liked. That is so many people. As I leave work, I look down at my phone. I'm up to 1,000 now. It's sort of, the Kevin Bacon game is true. In that a friend will retweet something, their friend will retweet something, their friend will retweet it, and eventually Will Wheaton from Stand By Me and Star Trek will retweet it. Turns out when something like that is retweeted a bunch, people get angry at you. A lot of people support you because a lot of people are bleeding heart liberals like myself. Other people want to tell you why your joke's wrong. Nobody's looking to ban gay marriage. Nobody's looking to ban birth control. First of all, this is 2015 when I tweeted out gay marriage had been legal in all 50 states for about 2 months. And this is something I had to keep telling people over the last 4 years, every time this tweet comes up. So, yeah, that was like a little brush with fame, and that was cool, my little internet fame. A few days later, there was a mass shooting. One of many around that time. I know because when there was a mass shooting, my tweet blew up again, and it blew up harder. Tens of thousands of people retweeting this every time there was a mass shooting. So that was a fun little alarm I had on my phone that every once in a while it would start vibrating a lot. And my first thought would be, oh no, how many people? Now, this is something I started to look forward to in a sick way, because at the time I was also clinically really, really depressed in a way that I had dealt with for most of my life, but it had gotten worse over the last few years. Mainly because I tried to start fixing it. For a while, I would ignore the problem. You know, if I'm not doing anything, it's not there. I grew up in a place where you were just expected to suffer. I was talking on the phone to my grandmother, and every time I would ask her how she's doing, this little old Italian lady, oh, not good. Life is shit. But what can you do? Every time. So this is normal. Depression's normal. But every time I took that step to fix it, you know, I was doing talk therapy for a while and it wasn't working. So every step was just one more thing that I knew wasn't going to work. So the fewer options you have, the more depressed you become. Because what if I'm a rare case? What if things don't work for me? And I didn't want to take medication for the longest time because I'm an artist and I didn't want that changing me. I wanted to still feel. I wanted to still understand. I didn't want to be numb to the pain that provides your art. Then I tried medication, and it was making things worse. I was on so many different things that I can't remember all the names. I can't remember all the therapists I talked to, all the psychiatrists I talked to. So for a while, as I was getting more and more numb, I would go on Twitter and try to distract myself. Because if I can't fix this, let's look at this. Maybe I can do something about this. And eventually I would be tweeting out I'd be live tweeting my downward spiral in the hopes that if I do this, I'll get some attention from other people, or I'll relate to people who might be feeling this and not know that this is what they're feeling. So I was getting like a little following of, you know, the Twitter followers I had built up from this tweet are now finding me for a different reason, because I am sad. I am a sad person. And you don't realize how sad sometimes. Like, I like to give people the barometer of sometimes you don't realize you're depressed, but picture your funeral. Are your parents there? There are times when I would get rid of my suicidal tendencies because I think, I really should kill myself, but my parents cannot afford a funeral right now. So for them, I won't kill myself right now. One person that I started getting a relationship with on Twitter based on this was a guy by the name of Darren Hayes. It was a name that I recognized, but I wasn't sure why, and I Googled the name. And what came up was that he was the lead singer for a band called Savage Garden in the middle to late 90s. They were popular around the time, probably for the last 20 years, in every prom and wedding you've ever been to. They had the song, I Want to Stand With You on a Mountain. Anyway, this is a guy that I realized was following me and liking a lot of my stuff, so I tweeted at him, oh my God, I just realized you're following me and how rad that is. And he tweeted back, wow, you're following me too, how rad is that? And I'm like, I'm friends with this guy now. This is my little internet friend. I'm friends with a famous person. I'm friends with a guy whose voice I heard when I was trying not to rub my boner on like another 14-year-old in a school auditorium. So like a year had gone by, a little over a year had gone by of this. Every mass shooting, every time abortion rights were threatened, every time gay marriage was threatened, my tweet would blow up. And I'd sadly jump into that fire and just embrace that outward sadness so I didn't have to think about the inward sadness. New Year's Eve was coming up. New Year's is one of those days, one of 2 days every year that I got at my lowest, my birthday and New Year's Eve. Because every time that comes around, that was a signal to me that another year had gone by and I had accomplished nothing, and I was still sad. And that particular New Year's Eve, this is 2016, I was real down and tweeting out like real dark shit, you know, finding hard to put jokes into it. And I get a DM from Darren, and he goes, "Nick, what's your phone number?" I said, "Why?" He goes, "I'm going to call you. What is your phone number? We need to talk." I said, "Oh, no, you don't have to do that." You know, I know I don't have to do that. I want to do that. What is your phone number? So I give him my phone number. And he goes, "Okay, can I call you in like an hour?" And I wait, and an hour's coming up, and he's still not calling me. And he goes, "I'm on my way out of the house. Can I call you tomorrow?" And I say, "Yeah, sure. Don't worry about it. Don't worry." And he goes, "No, never mind. Do you have like 30 minutes right now?" I said, "Yes." So I go out to my car so my girlfriend can't hear this conversation. And I'm on the phone. He calls up. "Hi, this is Darren." He says it in an Australian accent. I can't do an Australian accent. So his voice will be my voice. He goes, "Hi, this is Darren." I said, "Hi, thank you. You know, you didn't have to do this. Thank you for He goes, "Yeah, no, I know what you're going through. I have been there. I have bipolar 2, which is something that I may or may not have had, not been diagnosed. But I've had this medication that you've been on, and that didn't work for me either. And I thought everything was going to shit, and that wasn't working. Then I got on this medication, and things are going good for me now." And when like friends and family try to comfort you, it's hard to believe them because they care about you. It's like, you're just saying that to make me feel. When a stranger with money tells you you're going to be okay, you're like, "Oh, you don't have to do this. You could buy and sell me." So I sort of, that meant a lot. And I'm just in my car breaking down, crying. And he's telling me, "No, I was on this medication. I'm on this now. All of it's good." The other thing I knew about him is he had stopped doing so much music and was focusing on sketch comedy. I think he was taking classes at the Improv or something. And at the time, I had been looking into sketch writing classes, but didn't know if I wanted to do it or spend the money or anything. I just wanted to do something in comedy. And he goes, "No, absolutely do it. You have to do that." So I got off the phone with him, and that day I signed up for sketch classes. And the next week, I saw my doctor and got on the same medication that he was on. That was 3 years ago. I've been doing stand-up now for 2 years, been doing sketch that long, and I haven't wanted to kill myself in like a year and a half. The one weird wrinkle to that story is that Darren Hayes is no longer following me on Twitter. And I do not know why. I don't know what broke him. I have his phone number, but I'm afraid to call him and ask him. That is my story. He saved my life, and life really is a savage garden sometimes. Thank you so much. I've been Nick Martucci.
Wow, Nick, wow, that's like the first actually good Twitter story I've heard, because I have to admit, I'm not good at it, but I actually am on Twitter, and I have like 3 accounts, but one I made up a long time ago because some friends said, "Ken, you got to go on Twitter." And we were sitting in a bar drunk, so I made up this stupid account, and I called myself like Ballmeister7. It was something like a 70s disco guy. And it was odd because there were obviously 6 other Ballmeisters. That was the weird part. How many guys are on here? The other is, of course, Story Club Boston, where I put stuff on there on the shows and stuff. And it's another one I don't tell anybody what it is, because I want to be able to like write stuff without people I know say, "Hey, I read what you." I don't want like, the real world to come into this goofy world of Twitter stuff. And I want to just say stuff to different people or whatever. And it's been, and you do get like every once in a while somebody famous will say, "Hey, write back," or whatever. And It's kind of unusual. It's good, but they never helped me out, so I'm not at your level yet, but I'll get there soon. All right. Oh, next up. Oh, let me think who's next up here. It's somebody I might have seen a couple times here and there, around town, whatever. Actually, it's the real host of our show, the one we do at the Milky Way Lounge. The others we do at other different places. The one that was on the stage a few minutes ago, like I said, she's a very funny comedian. Did a residency recently at the Comedy Studio, if I'm correct. She does her own show at the Midway Cafe Sunday nights, starting at a very late hour. That's too late for old people like me, but I may try to make it one day. And what else? She's according to her, a musician with quote marks around it. So please welcome up Angela Sawyer.
Thank you very much. Ken is correct. I am a musician only with quotes. I play experimental jazz, which is when it imagine if stand-up was, instead of trying to have fun and make people laugh, you were just trying to creep them the fuck out. That is experimental jazz. Doesn't matter how you make sounds. Doesn't even matter if you make sounds. You're just supposed to vibe the shit out of everybody. And that is really fun. I love making people uncomfortable. So I want to tell you guys, for a long time, I didn't start doing comedy until I was in my 40s, until I was 42. And for most of my life, I worked in record stores and played weird jazz that freaked people out and no one liked. And I basically, I didn't get along with my family when I was growing up. And when I got into my 20s, I realized that there were these subcultures that were like little islands of misfit toys where you could have your own new family that you just made. And I thought there was only one island. And I lived on that island. And then in my 40s, I realized there are more, which sounds so dumb, but it is completely true. For all of my 20s and 30s, I was utterly convinced that people who didn't have paragraph-long opinions about Phil Spector that they could spit out on cue were just not human beings. I was very judgmental and strange. So I did sort of, I still love music and I still play music here and there. But over the course of working at record stores and being around town and living on that little island of misfit toys, I realized that they weren't really my family. That eventually you have to raise yourself anyway. Even if you pick a tribe family, it's not that that's not there, but eventually you still have to grow up and turn into an adult somehow. And I was slow. It took me a little longer than it should have. So I want to tell you about the first time I ever met someone where I was like, this person should be part of my family, and they weren't. Basically, a lot of people who, I don't think of myself as a person who's quirky. Quirky is for cute, hot young girls with bangs and a plaid purse. That's quirky. I am like a bridge troll, more in the bridge troll territory. That's my people. That's my territory. That's what I am comfortable with. And I just happen to look like a middle-aged lady. I'm really a bridge troll inside. So people who are interested in records, they're creepy. They are creepy motherfuckers, and there are not a lot of women interested in that. So if you don't know anything about there are a lot of people in this room who know about underground music. If you out there don't know, here's the thing. Underground music is like all the bands that were really into the Velvet Underground but were bad. They also put out records, and some people ruin their lives listening to those records. So, and not very many women are into that world. I think, actually, in fact, I think at least during the 90s, I don't know how many men are like record collectors across the country. Maybe a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. It depends on how you count it, probably. But I know exactly how many women record collectors, especially of like 60s music, that sort of thing. Exactly 6 women other than me. Exactly 6. And I know that because that is the number of women that Carl asked to marry him. Carl asked 7 women, well, 6. I thought I was going to be number 7. I was not. So here's how I met Carl. In the early 90s, I was working in a record store because I worked at them for 20 years. And so I was at work, very excited to sit at work all day, write electronic letters to people on big computers like the size of this. And it was cool to like write to other people that you didn't know, in other parts of the country. And you would get a response in like 3 days instead of like 2 weeks. It was pretty cool. And so I belonged to some like, I don't even, news groups, whatever they were called. Some weird groups. Like, I'm talking about the internet when there were no photos. Photos took like 20 minutes to come in. There were still weird groups. And one of them, I met Carl in this group, and we wrote back and forth. He liked records that I thought were cool, and I liked records that he thought were cool, and we chatted. And he chatted with other people, too, and I chatted with other people, too, and it was fine. And one day, he lived in San Francisco, and one day he was like, hey, I'm thinking of coming to Boston for vacation for whatever other thing, vacation. I don't know why people go on vacation places, but he was like, I'm thinking of coming there. Can I stay at your house? And I was like, of course. We know each other, and like that'd be fun. We'll listen to records that we both like, and we'll check things out. We'll chat about stuff that only we care about. That'd be so nice. And I thought, great, that's the end of my obligation to this. I don't have to, I live in a punk house. I'm not I don't have to make any plans in order to host a person at my house. I don't have to make a bed. I don't have to do anything. I just wait for them to arrive. So I'm I forgot about it entirely. I'm just going to work, doing my thing, whatever. And customers, obviously the community of people who care about this stuff, everyone. But customers started coming up, and they would just walk up with their purchase and be like, I hear Carl's going to stay at your house. You probably shouldn't let that happen. And I was like, what the fuck? And most of the people who were making those purchases were dudes who were 10 or 20 years older than me. And so I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not interested in your opinion. Cool. Great. And then it kept happening. People kept being like, you probably shouldn't let Carl stay at your house, just out of the blue, telling me that. And so eventually, one who was particularly nice said something a little more polite, and I was like, why? What is wrong with Carl? What is the problem? What is the scene? What are you trying to tell me? And he was like, well, Carl doesn't have boundaries. And I was like, dude, you're buying 3 copies of the same record with a naked woman on it for the boobs. Like, none of us have boundaries down here. This is the land under the bridge. We're not the boundaries people. And he was like, and I was like, whatever. So I forgot about it completely. So I'm, at work at the crack of dawn, which in record store world is 2 p.m. And I'm, tired and like getting ready to spend my day writing electronic letters and put price tags on records. And I hear the sound, all record stores in basements, I hear the sound of what sounds like about 450 records falling down the flight of stairs leading to the door. Not 500, not 700, not 200, 400 records falling down the stairs leading to the door. And I look and I'm like, well, that's a lot of money out of somebody's ass, but not mine. And I go back to my electronic letters. And then a few minutes later, the door flies open, and it's not 400 records, it's Carl. Carl turns out to be like a 6'5", 350-pound dude with a broken leg, a cast, and it's raining, so he is dripping wet. He is soaked through bikini contest wet. And he comes in, and he's wearing like a Simpsons t-shirt and shorts, which is not appropriate weather for Boston on any day. Definitely not when it's raining. He has no coat, and he has a suitcase, but not a ton of stuff. But he's pissed. He's furious because it's raining, and he slipped on the stairs. He's not injured more. But he's very annoyed, and he immediately starts ranting about how he needs to put his foot up because his foot's in this huge cast. He doesn't have crutches. I don't know how he got there. But he's like, I got to put my foot up. I'm really thirsty. What the fuck? And I'm just like, oh, okay, well. So a store is not a place with like a couch. There's no real good place to. The only place to sit is like when you walk in, there's like a big counter for like the register and all that stuff. And then there's like a desk that has CDs on it. And then the rest of the things are shelves that you can't sit on. So I clear the CDs off the desk and I set him up right near the door. And he puts his foot up on the register and basically blocks the door to come in with his foot. Also, maybe you guys don't know this. The people who make shorts, well, the people who make all clothes, but especially shorts, if the people who make shorts for fat people are evil shitbags. They're not cool. They have decided as a group that if your shorts need to be bigger this way, they also need to be longer this way. That's just how they've made them. So as a result, if you are overweight at all and you wear shorts, they will come down to below your knee, and the crotch will be like about 1.5 inches above your knee. Guaranteed. Guaranteed every time. You cannot buy non-Bermuda shorts. So Carl is like trying to get comfortable. He's like putting his foot up higher and higher, giving me a huge view of his balls all day long. I got an 8-hour-long view of Carl's balls, which were also wet. It was very long. Carl showed up at the beginning of the day at 2 in the afternoon, and I didn't get off of work until 8 o'clock at night. And so we just hung out there and didn't do much. I kept typing electronic letters mostly. Whenever someone came into the store, he would yell at them and then ask him to go get him water, to like leave and go get him a cup of water. And some of them did. And I was just like, okay. So we're hanging out, I guess, and finally, I'm like, okay, I guess it's time to go home finally. And we're chatting some. It's not, onerous or whatever, but like we're not really friends. We don't know each other either. So we don't have 8 hours worth of conversation in us. And when we leave, it's still raining. I usually walk home from work, and I'm like, well, not today. I can't bring a dude who can't walk with me. So there's no Uber yet, so we get a taxi. So I spend my day's paycheck on a taxi to go like the 4 feet to my house. And we get to my house, and then it's a whole 9 yards. Like, I got to get all of his stuff in and get all of his stuff out. We're both now very drenched with rain. We get into the hallway. My roommate's theremin is in the way. We got to like pull it out of the hallway, the whole bit. We finally get him and his stuff and his cast up into my apartment. And I think finally, like, if I can put on some record, Bing Crosby be fine at this point, any record, and just have him pay attention to it for like 5 minutes, I can power down, and then we'll be fine. And I walk into my house, and when you walk in the door, there's a kitchen, and then there's like the main living room or whatever it's called. And I walk in, and all the furniture's missing from my living room. It's just not there. And instead of the furniture, one of my roommates and 3 people that I don't know are sitting around, they're sitting on overturned, like, big trash cans, like 30-gallon trash cans. And there's another 30-gallon trash can between them. They're playing cards. There's a huge pot smoke cloud over their heads. And a river of water is coming from the light fixture, which is on, into the bucket. And I look at that scene for a second, and the thing that surprises me most is that they're playing cards. Honestly, I'm like, cards? What kind of weirdos are you? And I walk in and I look at that and I'm just like, oh, this is insane. What the fuck? And they're like, yeah, right? And then they just go back to playing some more cards. Carl comes blundering in behind me. And up until this point, his speed at moving through our world has been like 0.000000004 miles an hour. Very lumbering, you know, like he can't move well. He takes one look at those dudes playing cards and is magically flying back down the stairs out of my house with barely, I'll get a hotel on the way out. He immediately leaves. He's terrified of me. He spends like a week and a half in town staying at other people's couches, telling them that I'm a fucking weirdo. And I'm still not married. So, if you ever want a lesson on how to creep out your own stalker, come see me. I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to do. That is my story. I'm very excited to bring up your next performer. This guy, I find him super, super charming, very, very funny, super sharp storyteller. He is at Thunderbar a lot. I think he's going to start helping me run Shaves, which is a storytelling show I run out of my house sometimes. And he's super lovely. If you don't love him immediately or already, you will instantly. He's so great. So please put your hands together right now for Andrew Vickers.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I want to tell you guys a story that happened when I was 6 years old. When I was a real little kid, I had 6 best friends, and 5 of them were my siblings. And the 6th was our 75-year-old next-door neighbor, Mrs. Eichert. And there's a couple reasons that these were my best friends. In the case of my siblings, all 6 of us were born exactly a year and a half apart. All 6 of us were homeschooled. And we grew up in a very part of the country. Down there in Bethlehem, North Carolina. I'm sure you've all heard of it. And that's where Mrs. Eichert came in. She was our next door neighbor. And every day during the summer when we were playing outside, we could see her down there on the front porch of her house in her rocking chair with her late husband's double-barrel breech loader 12-gauge shotgun across her lap, ready to take pot shots at all the groundhogs and gophers that came up out of the woods to get the radishes in her garden. And we'd be playing outside, and we'd shout down to her, "Hey, Miss Eichert," and she'd go, "Hey, babies." And we loved her, man. We'd go visit her house, and she'd just pump us full of sugar. She'd give us homemade apple butter. Still not entirely sure what that is. And she had a clear jar full of ambiguously flavored hard candies from the Great Depression, like all grandmas, you know, like a Fear Factor episode every time you stick your hand in there. She was the greatest, man. We loved her. And we played outside all the time because that's what you do, I guess. I don't know. And we had 2 dogs, a Spitz and a Labrador. And Mom and Dad said we could name them. So we named them Foxy and Maxie. Because if you homeschool your kids and you foster creativity and you tell them they can name the dogs, your dogs are going to have stripper names. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. The really screwy part about that is, though, we named the dogs before any of us could write. Found out later that Dad spelled Maxie with 2 X's the entire time, which is way strippier. Like, Could very easily have just been a nice, innocent little thing that we gave the dog stripper names, but he inexplicably doubled down for some reason. Like, Maxie, huh? I used to know a Maxie. And if you're having trouble imagining what it's like to have 6 kids, very close in age, all homeschooled, just imagine 6 identical toddlers with pretty good vocabularies that all share one outfit. That's what it was like. We played together outside all the time. And the dogs would escape from out the chain link fence in the backyard. Because there wasn't a lot going on around besides Mrs. Eichert, there was pretty much nothing for 10 acres in any direction. So they would escape out from the chain link fence, and they would go behind Mrs. Eichert's house, over the river, through the woods, and through a cornfield to Old Man Bumgarner's farm. Now, Old Man Bumgarner had dairy cows and a suspicious amount of money. I say suspicious because, yeah, he had dairy cows, but only 9. So either those 9 cows were supplying milk to all of Alexander County, or way back in the old days, the Bumgarner family used to own a lot of people. He's the villain of this story. And so the dogs would escape. They would get to Mr. Bumgarner's farm. They would chase the cows, spoil their milk. Because when a cow gets spooked, then can't get milk from it. We all, of course, know this. And so it got to be where, like, at least once a week, Old Man Bumgarner would pull up into the driveway with the 2 dogs muzzled up in the back of his truck, and he'd just bang on the door until my dad answered, just angry as could be to cuss him out, just... My dad would answer the door and he'd go, God damn it, Vickers. I swear to God, if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times, I'm going to shoot these goddamn dogs in the face. And the 6 kids hearing the commotion, we'd run up from out in the backyard, you know, trying to look presentable, all wearing a different part of the outfit. You know? And Old Man Bumgarner was on a roll. He was like, Vickers, I swear to God, I don't know what kind of wacky-ass operation you're running here with these 17 half-naked ragamuffins always wandering around, and your Mexican wife. My mom is Brazilian, okay? It's offensive on so many levels. I don't know if you have ever met a Brazilian or a Mexican, or you can tell maybe by looking at me. We don't look alike. This man had to do some research for that level of racism. My mom is essentially a white lady that can cook and dance. Like, it's... I don't know. Very silly. But he would, every week. He'd bring him back. We got scared because he was going to shoot him. Legally, he would have been allowed to. You know, they were on his property. It's weird down there. So it got to be pretty common that whenever someone noticed the dogs missing from the backyard, they'd go inside, they'd tell Dad he could go out into the woods because it's a couple acres before Old Man Bumgarner's farm. He could call him, get him back, avoid a shooting. So this all happened in the summer of 1999. Means my eldest sister was 10, my brother was 8, I was 6. The younger sisters were 4, 2, and newborn. So one day, we're all playing outside, everyone except the baby. There's a lull in the game. Someone points over to the backyard and says, hey, the dogs are gone. And immediately, my eldest sister starts crying. The 2-year-old goes, God damn it, because she'd heard that a lot, you know. We heard a thump, turned around, the 4-year-old had fainted. It's a problem. She still does that a lot. She's getting married this year. We got to figure that out. Everyone was very upset because we knew what it meant. So someone said, okay, well, we got to go inside and tell Dad. But then my brother said, hey, wait a second. Dad's a busy guy. We can go find him. Immediately, the 2-year-old said, God damn it, again. We understood the gravity of what he was suggesting. We'd never been in the woods before. As much as we wanted to, every time Dad went to look for the dogs, we couldn't go. We weren't allowed. It was sketchy back there. Who knows what goes on in Bethlehem? There's probably meth. There's Old Man Bumgarner with a shotgun at least, you know. But my brother said, hey, you know, maybe he'd say yes. And so I was volunteered to go and ask Dad if we could go look for the dogs. I was volunteered because everyone else at the time was either passed out, could whoop my ass, or only knew the words, God damn it. So I went up to the house, tentatively opened up the kitchen door, saw Mom and the baby at the dining room table. I saw Dad at the kitchen washing dishes, and there at his feet looking real content, Maxie and Foxy. And Dad turned around and looked at me, and he said, hey, man, what's up? I just looked back at him, and I said, nothing. And I turned around, went back outside to where my siblings were waiting, and they said, "What did he say?" And I said, "We're good." I don't know what got into me, man. Sense of adventure, call it what you want. But we marched into the woods behind Mrs. Eichert's house. And as we passed Mrs. Eichert on the front porch, keeping a lookout for gophers, she said, "Hey, babies, where are you going?" And we said, "Well, we're going to go look for the dogs in the woods." She said, "Well, did you ask your daddy?" And we said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "All right. I don't know about all that." And then we went in the woods, and within, I'd like to say an hour, but it's probably more like 10 minutes, we were hopelessly lost and frightened. And then another hour went by when we got even more lost, and everyone started to panic and cry, and it was just all very dramatic. Pretty soon we heard the familiar sound of a 12-gauge shotgun being fired over and over again, and all we could think was, old man Bumgarner is going to come get us. But then sense kicked in, and someone said, "Well, okay, even if old man Bumgarner was going to kill us, he's shot like 17 times by now. We'd be dead, at least one of us, right? Maybe he's shooting at the dogs." And I was in the back of the group, and like the helpful genius I am, I said, "Nope, can't be shooting at the dogs. The dogs are up at the house." And they all, the look on their face when they turned to, "You son of a bitch." It was truly awful. They were very upset. 4-year-old fainted again. I mean, it was just a mess. Eventually, though, we realized, well, so if he's not shooting at us and he's not shooting at the dogs, what's he shooting at? Maybe it's not old man Bumgarner at all. Maybe it's Mrs. Eichert. And so we start making our way towards the sound of the 12-gauge. Again, guys, homeschooled. We're dragging the 4-year-old by her heels. 2-year-old's going, "God damn it," the whole way. And eventually, after about another hour, I mean, it was a long time, we made it out of the woods and we saw Mrs. Eichert's house. And she was sitting there on the front porch, and she said, "Well, when I figured out that y'all had lied about your daddy letting you go in there, I knew there was one way to get y'all back." She'd been shooting the shotgun to lead us back home like some fucked up Hansel and Gretel shit. And we looked up her driveway at our house. There were 3 state trooper cars there. There was Mom running around in circles, holding the newborn whose head was going like this every time she passed a corner. And my dad with this look on his face. And he marched straight down the driveway to us, and he said, "Son, I'm happy you're home, but let me be very clear. If you ever endanger the lives of your siblings like that again, I'm going to give you to old man Bumgarner." And I believed him. I was grounded for a pretty long time. The cops saw the look on my dad's eyes, and they're like, "Oh, you got this, man. You got this. We're out." They left. And that's my story, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh my God, give it up for Andrew. That was amazing. Yeah. I grew up in Denver, and Denver's very Denver is like if Home Improvement was a life instead of a show. It's like being inside a television most of the time. I think other people probably like it. It's very outdoorsy. It's fun if you like hiking. I do not. But I did for a while. There are parts of Denver that are very rural. So for a little while, when I was 12, there was a possibility that I was going to go live in Last Chance, Colorado. It's a real place, I swear. My mom, whose job, most of the things that I say from my childhood sound like cartoons or like horror stories. I can't get the middle. My mom's job was working at a place called the Happy Valley Children's Ranch. And she wanted to move, and she found a job teaching at a 1-room kindergarten through senior in high school schoolhouse in Last Chance. And she had a 12-year-old daughter, me, And she said, let's go stay there for a couple weeks and get to know the people there and see if I should take that job. And I was like, let's not. Let's never, ever do that. And she was like, no, that's what we're doing. So we went and lived there for a couple weeks and got made fun of for not being hick enough every minute of every day. Every minute of every day. The people who lived there, very lovely people who let us live in their house for 2 weeks and cooked us a million meals. Also, they got up for the day at 3:30 in the morning because that's what farmers do. And they were really, truly furious that us city ladies wanted to sleep in till like 5:30. So they found out very quickly, like there were adults, but I was 12, so I was mostly left to hang out with whoever was under 30. And whoever was under 30 was like some people who were in their early 20s and had other things to do besides pay attention to me. And then like two 12-year-old boys. And the two 12-year-old boys discovered that, one, I was from the city. Two, their parents didn't like me or my mom because we were also from the city. And three, my last name was Sawyer. Which means that they tried to get me to paint a fence about every 5 minutes. About every 5 minutes for 2 weeks. So at the end of the 2 weeks when my mom was like, wow, this was more different than I thought it would be. Did you like living here? I was like, fuck you. That's the story of the last time I swore at my mom. Okay, we've got one final performer for you. One of the best in all of New England. So truly incredibly funny. A recent transplant from Connecticut. So great. Please give it up right now for Kendra Dawsey.
Thank you, everyone. As Angela said, I am indeed from Connecticut. Whenever I tell people that, no one ever expects it because I am Black. They do not expect it, and I understand why. You know, when most people think of the state of Connecticut, they think of like a white dude with lots of money, lots of Ivy League degrees, and lots of drop rape charges, you know? Yeah. That's not me. Not me. I think the one exception to this rule, though, is once I was doing a show in Miami, Florida, and I asked a woman in the audience, what do you think of when you think of Connecticut? And her response was, I fucking don't! She's living her best life. I live in envy of her every single day. You do not understand. I lay awake at night being like, what if I never knew about this place? What if? But the reason why I made it to Connecticut is because I attended Yale University when I was younger, and this is the longest I've gone without telling a room full of people that fact about me. So you're welcome. You're welcome, okay? Going to Yale was kind of weird. Yale is in New Haven. New Haven is known for a lot of different things. It's known as being like a crime-filled place. Like when I first moved there for college, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, you should be careful because there are some dangerous areas, you know? And then I would go to those areas and there was just a Black kid riding a bike. That's all it was. I was like, Sharon, this is my cousin. But so it's known for those areas, but there's also Yale, like this place that's full of like wealth and privilege and all of that, right? So I first attended there. I was like kind of confused. I grew up in like the suburbs, but like a middle class family in the suburbs. Like I went to a public school. I went to Yale, and then I figured out what J. Crew was. I actually learned what J. Crew was. I realized that people just eat gold for fun. I learned so much about the world at Yale. And one thing that I learned is that there's a lot of crime that goes on at Yale. Even though people think New Haven, like outside of Yale, has all the crimes there are like, oh, you like steal food because you need it. At Yale, people will do things like just wild stuff, like steal a J. Crew jacket for the lulz, That's Yale. I think one of the most recent Yale crimes was the bribery scandal. Did you hear about that? Where some parents of students paid to get them in. I could have told you that just going there. I honestly could have told you that going there, because sometimes you'd be in class, you'd be having a great discussion, and then someone would raise their hand and be like, well, I think that computer engineering isn't actually a male-dominated field because we have pink iPods. And you'd be like, how the fuck did you get in? And then you'd realize their last name was Rockefeller Kennedy Ford or something. And you were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Your parents are rich. They'd wear the ugliest clothes, just Crocs covered in gold, just to show off how rich they were. It was so bizarre. But yeah, there are a lot of crimes that happen at Yale, but I think if you're an average, working class or middle class Yale student, the crimes that you do are really generic, right? You might take some drugs, you might sell some drugs, and if you're feeling really zany, you might pull a fire alarm. Very general crimes. But some of the most well-known and iconic crimes from Yale University actually come from our alumni. And some of those include the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Very prominent Yale crime. And then in Dick Cheney's case, just shooting a man in the face. Very well-known Yale crimes. We are known for so much. But George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, they were dudes that they had lots of money and power. Their entire families went to Yale, all of that. I was a working class Yale student, as I said. I was the first in my family to attend any 4-year college, let alone Yale. So the only crimes that I felt comfortable doing were taking Molly and peeing in a bush, all right? I only did those 2 crimes. I did them on separate days because I thought it was somehow more illegal if you double down on it, You gotta space it out like Monday, Wednesday classes. That's the best part. But yeah, Yale was a very new experience for me. I did a lot of weird things. I attended naked parties. I was in a naked society. We literally just hung out naked. Please don't tell my dad. We would throw naked parties, which is different from an orgy. First thing I want to say, different from an orgy. And the way we would ensure that was not an orgy, because, people feel really embarrassed when they're naked or they're kind of shy. So they would drink a lot to not be shy, and then you drink a lot, and then you want to make out with someone, and then, it turns into an orgy quick. But to make sure it was not an orgy, what we did is we had a very ridiculously large dildo. And whenever we would see someone making out at the party, we would just shake it in their face. Just, and then we would politely ask them to leave so that the environment did not become sexual, right? Which so that it didn't become sexual in a way that was oh, this is sexy. We wanted it to be sexual in a way where it's oh, why is someone carrying around such a large dildo? This is impractical. It's an impractically large dildo. So we wanted it to be funny sexy, but not actually sexy. You save that for afterward, right? But yeah, being at Yale was a wild time. Sometimes I do feel kind of disappointed with my experience, though, honestly, because I feel like I tried all the right things, right? I tried to take all the best classes, go to my professor's office hours, and do all the right extracurriculars and stuff like that. But even then, I did not see cocaine once. I really did not see it once. That's the sad part. I didn't even want to do it. I just wanted to be at a party and someone have it, and I'll be oh, it kind of looks like baby powder from here. That's all I wanted out of Yale. That's all I wanted. I paid so much money. I was on financial aid. A white man paid so much money for me to not see cocaine at Yale, okay? So I didn't see cocaine, but I did see a white person's pubic hair for the first time. And I think in some cases, some areas that's considered a sign of social mobility. Am I right? Moving on up like the Jeffersons. So as I said, I grew up in the suburbs, but my parents, they grew up in Spanish Harlem. So they moved from a place that had so much like wealth and culture and like great things to do. And then they moved up north to have me. So they moved from like Harlem, Spanish Harlem, has like Harlem Renaissance, all of that, to a town that only had 3 things, right? Had a Chili's, it had a lake, and it had an opiate epidemic. All it had. All it had. But they sacrificed so much to bring me there. Like they like saved up all this money to have a house. They moved to my like town specifically because it was known to have a good school district. They didn't know about the drugs. It was sad about the drugs because I was like, Mom, all of these drugs would be cheaper if I just bought them off your brother, but that's okay. This white dude with dreads is ripping me off these drugs. That's okay. That's okay. But they really sacrificed a lot for me to like be able to be in a position where I could go to Yale because like the school district was really good and I was able to like, connect with people who had been in that environment. And then I thank them by becoming a stand-up comedian, It's like, that is what I'm doing to my Yale degree. My parents, when I first got into Yale, they were like, oh, maybe Kendra could be a lawyer or a doctor or a CEO. And I wish I could go back in time and just tell my parents, your daughter is going to be suicidally depressed all 4 years. She's going to graduate by the skin of her teeth in ethnic studies. What the hell is ethnic studies? She graduated in yelling at white people. That's what she knows how to do. And not only that, but she's going to turn around and she's going to decide to tell dick jokes in bars, okay? That is what she's going to do with her Yale degree. So basically, my story is about why you should never invest in your children. Never invest in them. You will move, you will do so much in your life. You will move to a suburban town so different from where you've ever lived just to make sure your daughter sounds white. Just to make sure she sounds white. So that when she gets on the phone, she's like, oh, people are like, oh, she's a Jennifer and not a Janiqua. Great, we'll give her this job. My parents did all of that for me, made sure I went to Yale. They like learned about the college process so they could send me to Yale. And I have the nerve to be unimpressive, all right? That is what Yale did for me. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Ken, come on up here. Kendra, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
I should have went to Yale. I didn't know they had naked parties. You could just like, I wouldn't have been naked, but I just been like, I'm naked curious. Put it that way. I don't know. Just standing there. And what happens when? Well, I mean, you don't have to be making out, but somebody might be interested in making out with somebody. Did they just walk around with a, Yeah, or you just excuse yourself? I don't know. I have many questions. I have many questions for you. So, sorry.
I'll tell you this: the next person who gets to see. It won't be anybody in this room probably, but the next person who gets to see my white person pubic hair, I'm going to give them a badge. They're going to get their very own badge.
Oh my God, this is wound up very.
That was a terrible thing to say at the end.
This show is wound up. It's a strange ending to a storytelling show, but sure, that's good.
Whatever.
That'll work for me. It'll work for me. I'll go with it.
Thank you very, very much, guys, for being here and for doing the show. CCTV helps put this on, and they do a great job. They're really lovely to us, and we're very grateful that they were kind enough to have us.
That's it.
Ken is amazing.
Andrew's amazing. Is that
thank
a
you.
word? I don't know.
Sure.
I didn't go to Yale, so I don't know if that's a word or not.
We have a show every month at the Milky Way in Jamaica Plain. It's also called the Bella Luna Restaurant, and I don't know why it has 2 names, but it does.
Indeed.
And come be there. It has an open mic storytelling portion as well as some features of people that we like around town.
Tell your stories. And
yeah.
What else? We're at Twitter, Facebook.
We got all that stuff, yeah.
Yep, that's up. Look on, check the schedule here to see when this runs again if you missed it the first time. But anyway.
Yeah, and we'll be here again. Thank you.
Thanks
Have
a
a good
lot.
night.
Bye.